we're looking at a Mac Mini that I'm going to use to give you a demo of a DDP and P5 archive running on there. So you can see on the desktop of this Mac we have this test volume. So this is a volume that's mounted from the DDP Ethernet SAN device, and we have some data on here that we want to archive. So let's assume that this disk is filling up with lots of old work, and we need to somehow migrate that away to tape. And by doing that, we free up space, but we do it in a workflow that makes it easy to get this stuff back again. And there's various different workflows possible with archive that suit different ways of working. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of all three different ways that you can use it. So let's close that down, and I'm just going to switch to my web browser. And here is the graphical interface for the DDP. So this is the machine. The DDP is where Archiware is currently running. You can see here, this is where we're connecting the test volume to this Mac. So this is how this is mounted on the desktop. And then we have a button here to get to Archiware P5 directly from within this GUI. So we can then flick to this interface here. And then from here, we log in. And once we've done that, we will see the Archiware P5 administration interface, which includes 4 different modules, of which one is the archive, which is what we're going to be looking at today. Now, within the archive module, what you would normally do first is go to the storage manager section and go to your new tape library and follow this wizard through, and it will detect any fiber channel or SAS connected tape libraries attached to the DDP, or indeed any machine that you want to use P5 on. And then you go through the process of adding the library, and the whole use of the library is automated. The barcode scanning and the moving tapes between slots and drives, everything is handled automatically for you. For the purposes of our demo, I'm using a disk instead of a tape library, just because it's going to be quicker, and we're going to run a few different restore and archive jobs, and it's going to happen pretty much instantly by using disk instead of tape. But of course, tape is much quicker when you're actually really doing archiving of lots of files, and it's much faster, generally speaking, than the kind of disks that you get in a Mac Mini, at least. So under volumes, you can see my virtual tapes. So these are analogous to LTO tapes in the tape library. And what we do in P5 is we create a pool, which is a container, and then we can add as many tapes to that pool as we want to give ourselves unlimited storage capacity for archiving. So when you take on board the LTO 7 tapes at 6 terabytes a piece, if you get a library with 50 of those in, that's a lot of storage, but then you can take those tapes out and put another 50 in. So your capacity here is really kind of limitless with tape, and it's not particularly expensive either. Within the pool settings, it's possible to do things like cloning, which is what Mark mentioned in his slides, where we're creating a duplicate copy of the data, so you've got redundancy. Because generally, archive is about migrating. Migrating means moving the data to tape, which means deleting the data from the DDP or the disk storage where the data originated from. So we can do cloning in here, and we also have the ability to do, under parallelizing options, we can set up multiple streams and drives here so that we can really utilize multiple drive workflows in really useful and efficient ways, especially with the redundant writing that we can do. So what we'll do now is move to an archive plan, and I'm going to show you some different ways that you can actually do archiving to the same archive plan. So an archive plan is basically a configuration where we tie up the pool, which is the set of tapes that we're writing to, an index, which is a database on disk where everything that you archive goes, and this is what you're browsing to pull the data back. You can have multiple different index databases for different clients, so you can subdivide clients' work up, and that way one client's work can be independent of another client. We have the ability to filter out data here. I'll come back to that shortly. And what I'm going to do first is just show you the first way that you do archiving, which is what we call the automatic archive, where you're going to specify a volume, in this case on the DDP, and a schedule. So this folder here might be an area on a DDP where you're requesting that users place work that no longer needs to be on the DDP. And by moving work into that folder, what we're doing is having an automatic schedule that will then move that to tape later. So you see here I have a schedule defined which at 11 o'clock at night is on weekdays is going to run, and it's going to move the data to tape. And that's all that you need to do. So you have a folder or folders and a schedule, and then the process is automated. So all the users need to do is move stuff to the right place, and then that work is going to be moved off to tape, and space is immediately freed up. Now, the next way that you can use an archive plan is via manual archiving. So with manual archiving, what we do is in the browser interface, we present the DDP volume along with any other volumes that you want to be able to archive from. So you can install P5 on other servers on the LAN, and then have all of those servers present in the same web UI for archiving. So what we're seeing now in here is a map of what we're seeing on the actual DDP test volume. So I have some files in this folder, and if we look in the browser, we're looking at the same stuff. So we're looking at the same files. So now what I might want to do is let's actually run an archive. So I'm selecting some of these files here that I want to take off to tape, and then I'm simply going to say archive, and within this interface I have some metadata fields that I can fill out to describe what I'm archiving. So I'm going to put description webinar from my drop-down menu. This is just an example of the UI possibilities. So you can have free text fields, and you can have pre-populated menus to describe the work. And then we hit the start button. And then within P5's web interface, we can monitor that job. So what happens now is that we see the job running at the top there. We see completed jobs from earlier today running at the bottom, or completed. And when a job is running, we see the kind of stats that we saw when Mark was running, showing the video of the thing writing to an LTO7 tape earlier. So we get to see what's happening, how quickly the data's being written, and so on. So there's a movie here, and there's a few JPEGs as well. And it gives you the stats even down to how many gigabytes a day you're going to be able to save at the prevailing rate, which in our case is just tens of megabytes a second, because we're running from a relatively slow Mac Mini. So when that's finished, we'll see that job will then move down to the bottom section, which means that our job is complete. And what we'll then be able to do is browse the files that we just archived through our web interface in the index and see how we would then restore them. So that job there is now finished, and it ran successfully, has the green light. So in the restore section of the GUI, under archive, we can now browse our DDP archive index. And what we'll see here is the folder structure that we archived from. So we archived the test volume. Here's the archive webinar folder. And you can see these files at the top here with the archive date of 1823. That's the time in Munich at the moment. These are the ones that we just archived, whilst these other files here were archived earlier today. So you can see that you can browse a folder and see files that have been archived at different dates and times, all stored together as if they're a file system, but really this is a database. So things that we can do at this point, obviously we could choose a file and restore it. We can switch to our gallery view. So now you can see we have generated previews of each of the JPEGs that we just archived, plus the movie. We can also switch to an information view, which just shows us the preview and the metadata stored for each asset. So you can see here's the webinar text that I keyed in when I was archiving that file. For the movie file, at this point we are able to display the movie and let you play the movie preview. So this was about a 10-minute, 20-minute long movie, and the archive plan has been configured to just show us a 10-second preview from the beginning of the file. So you can see this 10 seconds is just playing through here. So the idea is that it gives you enough to get an idea about whether this is the right file that you're looking for, and then you might choose to restore it. You can configure the previewing and the metadata, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that in a second. But before I do that, I want to show you an even easier way of archiving data, and that is to not use this web interface at all, but just to use the Finder. So we have a special integration for the Mac Finder called the P5 Archive app. And what this does is allows you to archive directly from within the Mac Finder. So on a Mac, whether you want to access and archive data from a DDP volume, or some other file server or local files, as I'm doing here on the desktop, I can archive directly in the Finder. So the way that works is that we just right-click in the Services menu, we say Archive to P5, and then we're done. Now, in this case, I have the Archive app needs to prompt me for input of metadata. So as you saw in the browser, I can type in from Finder, just as something to locate later. I could also choose from the same drop-down menu and the same text fields, and then I trigger the archive job. At this point, what happens is the files get transferred to our P5 archive server. They would get moved to tape, but instead of being deleted from the view in the Finder, they will be replaced by stub files, and the stub files are very tiny files that replace the original large files that you archived. So that's what you can see just appearing on the desktop right now. So I think they've been scattered around for some reason. There's the other two. So these stub files, if we just look at the size of one of them, it's a mere 60 bytes. So it's a small amount of metadata that's needed to recover that particular file back from the archive. Although they're very small, if we double click on them, the archive app retrieves from the P5 server everything it knows about this file. So now we see the full path to where the file originally was located. We see the tape that the file is located on, the name of the tape, the barcode of the tape, if the tape has barcodes. We see the preview that we generated, and then we can also edit the metadata if we want to. But most importantly, we can restore the file. So if I hit the restore button on the top file there, we will get our original JPEG file reinstated and the stub file gets deleted. And this has just all happened by loading tapes and reading the tapes and so on, so in the tape library, in our case with disk. So now you can see the file comes back, and there's the JPEG file. So the archive app is an incredibly easy way for people with no technical knowledge to be able to access the archive running to tape using P5 Archive without any knowledge of how to do it. It supports Final Cut Pro 10, and there are other integrations with editing software coming soon. So that's another way to perform archiving. I'm going to flick back to the browser now, and just to show you in the browser, you can do something like make a selection here and then add to my restore selection. So the restore selection, I can then build a list of files, maybe from different folders, and add them into this list. And when I've got everything I need, I say restore. And then finally, the system will tell me which tapes, how much data, which tapes are required to actually perform this restore, and I would click start to trigger that job. I also want to mention that the metadata that we've been entering is all searchable. So if I go back to the search here, and if I search my description for contains, I think I typed in Finder when I was archiving from the Finder. Contains string may take a while. So these are the three files where the description is from Finder. So these are the three files from the desktop that we archived, and that was the metadata that I added. So the metadata is searchable. You can go and search the color field as well, and then you would get access to the different color items. So we have a full-blown database behind this that's managing the metadata for you. And in addition to having manually entered metadata like this, it's also possible to configure the system to capture data from within the files. So if you're archiving digital photographs and you want to be able to search on the camera model, for example, or movies, then you could ingest the camera model into the P5 archive index and then have that field searchable as well. Just returning to the archive plan briefly, which is where we originally did this configuration. It's possible to, within this area here, to set up the preview generation. So this is where you choose the length of the movie previews and the size of the still image previews. You can also utilize third-party tools to generate the previews for you. So if you're in an environment where you have some video transcoding ability, you can offload the preview generation of video to the video transcode hardware just by writing a shell script. And likewise, the metadata import is also configured by scripts, so you can write simple shell scripts to access metadata within files and populate our archive database. I'm close to wrapping up, but I'm just going to show you two more things. First of all, we have a field editor. So within our DDP archive index, which is what we've been browsing, there's an area called fields. And from here, you can see the description, the color, and so on. So I can add a new field in here very easily by just typing a field name, choosing an order, and adding it. And now we have a new field in the index that we can then start to populate and search and so on. And the last thing I wanted to show you is the file filter. So this is really powerful, actually. What we have here is a file filter that I've already defined that is excluding any directories called render files. So when you're archiving, you can isolate certain file types and folder names that you know contain data that doesn't need to be archived because it can be regenerated. So most NLEs, for example, will take the original rushes, generate proxies and transcoded files, and those files can always be re-rendered. So in order to keep your archive lean and small, it's a good idea to write some filters to filter out certain file names. So for example, if I wanted to write a file filter that matched where it ends with .tmp, for example, I can add that to my file filter, and then my file filter is a self-contained object that I could then go back to my archive plan, and whilst editing my archive plan, I can attach that filter here, and then any of those files that match will be excluded from the archive. So you're saving tape space, everything's going to run quicker. Of course, that's optional. And don't forget that there's a cloud functionality coming later this year for the archive module that will allow you to access things like Amazon S3 storage. So if you have a big amount of bandwidth, you can take files from your DDP or your storage and archive into the cloud so that somebody else is going to look after that for you, and then you get some very cheap storage rates in Amazon S3 with their Glacier product. So, Mark,
thank you, David.
You might want to tell me if I've missed anything, but that just about wraps it up for me.
Yeah, thank you, David. We have a couple of questions here. Let me start out with compatibility with library vendors. There was a question about the compatibility and what vendors we support. I'm happy to tell you that P5 is basically universally compatible with tape library vendors, so you can use whatever brand you choose and prefer. So it could be Oracle, IBM, HP, Quantum, Overland Tenberg, Qualstar, and any of the other brands. So they are all standardized internally, and we can talk to all of them and have customers with all brands and models actually. So there is another question here about rules. If we have any form to have rules for an archive, that I think David briefly touched on our filter feature that can be used as kind of a rules like an HSM system where you can
you can use modification dates actually. So you might want to select files that haven't been modified for some period of time and then use that as a selector. So rather than excluding files, you might say only include files that have been modified within have modified older than 60 days. So that would be files that haven't changed for 60 days. And then we would add that to the top box. Modification date is more than 60 days ago. And then by running that filter with an archive, everything will be in the folder that you're archiving will be checked to see if it's modified 60 days or more ago, and then that would mean it moves into the archive. So you can do that.
Yeah, and this is just the beginning, so you can select files or deselect files, and there's also an expert mode where you can formulate a regular expression, so really complex conditions that you want to, there's the export mode, that you want to be checked for and used in the archive selection. So that was another question. Then how to keep track of tapes. So when you buy tapes, they come with barcode labels, but above the barcode, there's also a human readable number. So you can also read the barcode, so to speak, or the number that's coded in the barcode. We list them here, and you can also have additional information added to the tape where you store it offsite. or where you store it out of or offline out of the machine. So the offline location here can be added to the tape information. That could be a specific shelf, a specific ward, a specific branch of your company, whatever it happens to be. So this was another question. Then there is the one question about, is there a specific line where you can say beyond this line you would need a dedicated server for P5 instead of having it run on the DDP? Maybe that's something, David, you would like to elaborate on?
Yeah, I think it would come down to the amount of load that running archives is placing upon the DDP's CPU and bus, and whether or not that's slowing down the DDP to the point where people can't edit as quickly as they need to. So it's hard to draw a line and say exactly when that would happen, but it's very easy to, the licensing is flexible, so you can move the license from the DDP to another server. We support Macintosh, Windows, Linux, Solaris, FreeBSD, so we're running pretty much on every operating system that's in use currently. So it's very simple to use a different independent server with an Ethernet connection to the DDP, and then maybe a fiber channel interface going up to the tape. So the short answer is I can't really tell you when it would be necessary to take P5 off of the DDP, because to some extent that would depend on the DDP that you're using and how powerful it is. But it would probably require some testing, and then you could establish if the DDP was powerful enough to do what you want. Otherwise, you would have to put the license somewhere else.
Exactly, and it's not just the power of the DDP, it's also the number of users that are concurrently using the machine. So if you have, let's say, at any time, every day, a number of restores, and they should be running while the DDP is running full power for editing, and you need to have, I don't know, a backup running at the same time, so then probably it's a good idea to have a dedicated server. Otherwise, it's of course possible to have an archive that runs maybe every night or something when the DDP has time off. That's fully okay on the DDP, but it depends on the total load, the number of concurrent users, the number of services that you're running on the DDP, if you want to combine backup and archive and sync, and so on. So, but you can of course try it out, and as David said, you can migrate the license easily. So there's a question about LTO6 versus LTO7. Of course, there is a price difference right now. And actually, the price difference is not in favor of LTO7 right now. So it costs more than twice as much as LTO6 tapes. Still, it makes sense to have an LTO7 drive because it's more than twice as fast and is, of course, the most future-proof device that you can get right now. It can read and write LTO6, and it can still read LTO5 tapes. So either you wait a little bit until pricing comes down, or if you have to decide immediately and will want it as future-proof as possible, then LTO7 is the way to go. If you want to save some money and it's necessary to save money with less capacity, then LTO6 of course is a viable and still powerful option. It depends on the total data volume that you have. So
if you're looking to buy a new tape library, your probably best bet is to buy an LTO7 tape library, but use LTO6 tapes in it for the time being until the price of LTO7 cartridges drops to the point where it's less than twice the price of the LTO6 cartridge. Which isn't currently the case. So I think I know of some customers that are using new LTO7 drives with LTO6 cartridges for now, and then they'll go to LTO7 cartridges in a couple of months when the price comes down a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably the best decision right now. Then there is a question about how long does it actually take to get something back from the archive. So if a customer returns after a year or something and wants their project back or all the media, how long does that take? That depends on if you have LTO6 or 7 drive. So with one it's 300 megabytes a second, with the other one 160 megabytes a second, and that's after they position the tape in the drive, which takes 30 seconds to a minute or something. And after that, you basically have a kind of a streaming operation of the tape. So tape is really fast as soon as it is positioned, and 300 megabytes a second in case of LTO7 allows you to restore even very big multi-gigabyte projects very fast. So it's not an issue of restore speed. It's just, maybe let me mention that if there are people who archive too early, so when there's still lots of edits being done, or if there's a chance that you have to recut it several times, then you have to restore basically every other day and then re-archive, then the archive point in time is not the right decision. So you should archive only when something is no longer needed for daily production, and then you restore it whenever you need it and need a couple of minutes to wait for it to come back.
Sure.
So there's one question about tape cloning. Tape cloning definitely needs 2 drives. You need to have 2 drives built in because the cloning is taking place at the time of archiving, and we write 2 identical tapes out there. And there's a lot of technical background on that. So we have to handle the tapes at the same time. We have to take care that they contain the same files and are exactly the same length and so on. So this definitely needs 2 drives, and there are more good reasons to have at least 2 drives in any tape library, because this ensures availability of the archive and files, even if one tape drive might break down, might have a problem, might need cleaning, whatever it might be, you still have the other drive and have accessibility of all your files. So 2 drives is a professional configuration that we can recommend in any case. There is another, there are lots of questions here, so maybe too many to answer now, but let me, the filter section. Okay, that's a very specific one. Multiple lines are treated as logical AND or logical ORs. Good question, David.
I think it's AND. Yeah, I think it's logically ANDed together. So in the instance, no, actually, I'll just change my mind. I think it's OR. I think the way this filter that we're looking at now would work is if files are in folders called render files or are .tmp. But if you want to send an email to support@jpy.com, like this, support@jpy.com, then we will we'll find out and we'll answer your question.
Okay, there's one question here about pricing. So Archiware pricing is really easy to find out if you go to www.archiware.com. Maybe David is doing that, and you can see on with the hamburger icon in the top right corner, this gives you the product configurator. And if you go to that, you just specify what you need. First, you specify the currency, if it's dollar or US dollar or euros, and then you specify what you want. You just need backup and restore, or you need backup and archive. Data duplication would be synchronized, and you click on that and specify the number of drives and slots that you have in a tape device that you want to find the license for. So, yes, exactly. So here you put in, no, that's a single. The next one, that's 2 single tape drives. Check that out. The next, yeah, exactly. So you have, let's say, 2 drives and 50 slots, and then you just press OK. And this gives you the cheapest license combination for that specific requirement, for that specific hardware setup. So now you have the P5 Archive Edition and slot licenses to come up to 50 slots. So that's easy for you to spec out that or discuss that with the customer or find the best solution for a specific budget. So let me go on. There is another question about our preferred platform. Is it Mac, Windows, or Linux? I would say that also depends on the total setup. So there are many media companies that only have Macs, so we are happy to live in a Mac-only environment. There are people who are only Windows, so we can live in only a Windows environment. And there are people who want to have a very high performance single server, and for that we can of course recommend Linux. So for us it doesn't make much of a difference. It makes a difference for you with your other environment, with other maintenance cycles, so that you don't have to jump platforms if you don't want to. You don't have to do that with us. And you can migrate the complete installation from one platform to the other very easily, because you can move actually the configuration directory of Archiware P5 to another machine and have the same configuration instantly. So it's basically up to you and depends on the total setup and the total landscape that you're facing. What are the methods that Archiware uses to ensure the integrity of the data that is being archived? So as I said, LTO has a data integrity mechanism. So it's a read of the write mechanism built into each LTO drive. So the drive verifies that actually the same data that were sent to the write head are have been arriving on tape. Then we do, of course, a file check during writing. And if you want to have an additional verify run, you can activate the verify run within the interface if you want to. It is time consuming, I have to say that. And you have to take into consideration that it's a full pass of the LTO media, and this shortens the lifespan of the tape. So the tapes have a lifespan of around 500 full write cycles, so where you can 500 times fill up the complete tape. If you verify it each time, it's only 250 full write cycles. But if that is important to you, then that's fine. Of course, you can understand that. That's why we built the feature. It takes, of course, a considerable amount of time as well. But for some people, it's the requirement that is important. So I think that was the question panel so far. Thank you very much for your time, for your interest, for attending, for the questions. And we will be sending a link to the recording. Somebody had troubles here receiving the audio, and we will send you links to all the relevant informations that we mentioned. So thank you again from my side. Thank you, David.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
And hope to hear from you. You have our addresses and you can contact us anytime. Otherwise, you will find most information on our website and in the resources mentioned. And thank you very much. We will probably be repeating this series in the next quarter. So if there are colleagues that you would like to point this out to, then there's still a chance to attend it in a couple of weeks. So thank you and bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.